Are you considering settling in Copenhagen and you wonder, but where should I live? Well, then this video is for you. I'm gonna cover the 6 districts of Copenhagen, which is Nørrebro, Vesterbro, Frederiksberg, Østerbro, the inner city, and Amager. And I will go through the pros and cons of each one of them to make it easier for you to make an informed decision. And in the end, I will also give you my recommendation, my personal recommendation of where I think it's the most interesting place to live in Copenhagen right now. My name is Stephen Højlund and I've lived in Copenhagen on and off for 30 years in total. I've traveled to quite many places in the world and also lived abroad both in the US and Europe. And this video is just to basically break it down for you what I would consider the most interesting and good start in Copenhagen if you want to live here. Moving to a new country, a new city is just not easy. There's so many things to look into, so many practicalities to get sorted out. And maybe you're sitting and considering moving to Copenhagen, or maybe you already moved to Copenhagen, but you're just in sort of a temporary situation, maybe in a room or an apartment paid by your employer. Well, in any case, this video is for you to make you more aware of what the different districts of Copenhagen can offer you. Ultimately, where you choose to settle in Copenhagen might actually define how you see and experience Denmark and how you see and experience Copenhagen as a city. It might change your view on the Danes and how it is to live here. So it is tremendously important, and that's also why I created this video, in order to make it a little bit more easy for you to see it from various sides. And finally, if you do think it's interesting to know a little bit more about Copenhagen, how to settle in Copenhagen, or any tips and tricks about living in Denmark and Copenhagen, then please like and subscribe in this video. Give me a thumbs up maybe in the comments, and don't hesitate to write me as well if you have a question, and I'll try to answer every single one of them. Thank you very much. Now let's get into it. So zooming in on the city, so Copenhagen city proper, what is called Indre By, meaning the inner city. You can basically see the layout looks like fortifications. So Christiania and the outer ramparts are part of the city. And you have this large area, Reffen, as you might know, definitely worth a visit if we should start there. You can go and visit Reffen Eatery, and there's a lot going on out here. Copenhagen Contemporary, like an art museum, and just a lot of activities in the summer. And if we move to the other side, we have Castellet, so an old ramparts as well, still used by the military actually, military secret services here have their, so not super secret. Here you have other parts of the old defenses, and here you have the lake's old water reservoir. So Copenhagen actually used to be this small, more or less, give or take. And so what you see here is actually part of the old ramparts, as you see in many European cities, as the city has basically outgrown the old layout. In the city center, there are so many things to see, so I don't have time to mention it all. You of course will go by the Amalienborg Castle, where the king resides. You can also go to Rosenborg Castle, which is a super nice venue as well. Obviously, city center is dense in terms of traffic. So in the city center, bikes are the most common and what I would definitely recommend you to use. So who really lives in this fairly condensed piece of land? I would consider it to be old money, the cultural elite, bohemians, and nouveau riche. I mean, of course, that's very stereotypic, but it does require quite a lot of money to live in the city center, unless you inherited it from a rich dad or rich mom. So the pros of living in the city center are the following. Of course, you live right smack in the city center, and it's the epicenter of Copenhagen's history, culture, and nightlife. You're surrounded by iconic landmarks, shopping streets, and a plethora of dining options. You're close to everything, basically, and if you really like strolling and discovering this area, this is of course for you to live in. There are many back alleys, courtyards, and cobblestone streets to walk on and explore. Also, just sitting and watching people from one of the many cafes is something I really like. The cons of living in the city center is that it's noisy and the cost of living is high, meaning that you might actually not have that many places to do groceries. And if you have, they are small, crowded, and pretty messy typically as well, because there's just so many people in them. It's very expensive to buy something in the city center, so it's difficult to get something that is spacious enough for most of the needs that at least I would have. So you should definitely expect smaller living quarters. Also, don't expect an easy time to find a parking spot if you have a car. So as much as I really like the vibe in the city center, I'm not sure that I could actually live there. So it's just a little bit too noisy in the weekends. And of course, if you have an aspiration to become a writer and you really like to watch different types of people and tourists and whatnot and live in maybe an old building, it's completely fine. But I don't think it's really for me. I like a little bit more calm around me. So I would rather move to some of the more residential areas. But I mean, you will find people in the city center who are the true Copenhageners, you could say, and they would basically consider all the different other districts that we're going to cover in this video to just not be real Copenhageners, right? So if you want to be a real Copenhagener, go for it, and if you have the money to pay for it, but I don't think it's for me. So let's look into Vesterbro and check that out. It basically starts all the way up from between Tivoli and the main central station here. You have the lakes over here, and then Frederiksberg on this side, and then on the other side you have Amager, which is obviously also a huge chunk of land here, a huge island. But actually most Danes would consider Vesterbro to be this. And now, since Carlsberg used to be basically more or less one large area of production for Carlsberg, which is now built out to be mainly residential areas, then naturally most Danes would probably also consider this to be Vesterbro now. Of course, it has always been. Not that I know the exact history of Vesterbro, but as you can clearly see here in the map, Vesterbro stretches all the way to include actually Sydhavn and parts of Valbyparken. So bordering Valby and bordering Amager on this side. Most people would probably consider Vesterbrogade, Istedgade here, and also Halmtorvet, and probably also Ingerslevsgade here, just by the tracks, by the train tracks, to be sort of the main routes, the main communication lines in Vesterbro. I actually used to live here in Ingerslevsgade with a very nice view over the tracks. I also lived here recently in Frederiksberg, so very often going into Vesterbro. And yeah, so what has really developed a lot since the metro came is obviously Inghaveplads. It's a really nice area, and everything from here towards the Copenhagen main central station is to be considered the old Vesterbro. And over here you have the meatpacking district, which is of course notorious for good restaurants. You have also here Skelbækgade in these areas, and over here you have Kvægtorvsgade and Halmtorvet, which is notorious for police station 1, station 1. Coming to the pros of living in Vesterbro, well, it's known for its bohemian vibe, and Vesterbro is the go-to for creatives and hipsters. At least it has been so for like maybe 10, 15 years. So it really boasts of a great selection of bars, restaurants, cultural venues. And also now the Carlsberg has really matured and into like a really nice area as well. So I do think that actually Vesterbro, coming from the main station all the way towards Carlsberg and Inghavepladsen, has grown into a really nice neighborhood to live in, and that's definitely pro to this area. It has a vibrant nightlife and a strong community feel as well. I actually grew up in Vesterbro in some of the working class buildings from the turn of the 19th to the 20th century, and there are many of them, these blocks, like red blocks basically, in Vesterbro, and now more cafes have started to come in between those and create a little bit more of atmosphere in Vesterbro. So I really do think there's a lot of good vibes in this neighborhood. On the contrary, on the con side, the popularity of Vesterbro also means higher rent prices, and it can be quite crowded, especially in the weekends in some of the main squares. Also, Vesterbro is still the center of prostitution and drug abuse, or heavy drug abuse in Copenhagen, so particularly around the area of the main and central station. So many streets can feel unsafe at night, especially close to the green meat district, or the meat district in general, and around the so-called Golden Triangle, as I showed you on the map. I like the diversity of Vesterbro. It's a very big district, and you can definitely find fairly nice and calm areas of Vesterbro. And that are still super central as well in terms of access to metro, access to the city center. Of course, around that particular area, very close to the main station, I would probably not live there myself. I think that's just a little bit too much, too hectic, a little bit too dodgy for me. But I mean, and particularly if I had kids, I would probably not settle there, but I do know people who had kids and lived there not so long ago, and they were perfectly fine. So it's not necessarily because of a lack of security or sense of security that people would not live there. So Vesterbro, definitely something a bit more for the young person maybe, but again, up to you. You can find anything in Vesterbro. And of course, you also have Carlsberg, which is a new and bustling and super exciting area of Copenhagen. Let's now move on to Frederiksberg and see what that has to offer. Frederiksberg is essentially a municipality within the Copenhagen municipality, which makes it a bit different. It has its own town hall, its own government in that sense, and it also do have another tax bracket, slightly different from the rest of Copenhagen, which it used to be 1% lower. It's not that much any longer, so more or less insignificant. But if you're into that stuff, then consider Frederiksberg to be a place to live. Definitely one of the most popular places to live in Copenhagen, for sure. And also a fairly large municipality, as you can see here. So it's just next to Vesterbro, so the lively Vesterbro. And of course the city center here, so very central. You can basically from the middle of Frederiksberg back to the city center in 15 minutes. And then next to the lively Nørrebro as well here. So in that sense, you are not far away, even though, Frederiksberg might be a bit bourgeois and a nice and calm place to live, but you're never far away from where there is a party, or where you have a little bit more diversity. You will basically see the intersection here at Vesterbro Gade. You have the split here at Værendamsvej, which is a very nice shopping street, also boasts many really nice restaurants. the French school here as well. So this is also known as the French area. You hear many French-speaking people in this area. Then Frederiksberg goes all the way to Ågade or Åboulevarden. So basically the large road leading into the Hillerød highway going north. Out here on the other side, you have the remains of what is called the Vesterbro, which is the fortifications to protect Copenhagen that had now grown considerably since the old fortifications that you clearly see from the ramparts here, outline of the ramparts here. So that was sort of, you can see here the green area, that was basically, there you still have the ramparts of a more modernized fortification of Copenhagen. You have here Søndermarken, which is really good for runs. It's a bit hilly. You also have the option of actually, you have parts of the zoo here, so you can stop several places here, for example, and then actually look into some of the animals, as well as you can on the other side where the zoo continues over here, just crossing the road. I believe there's a tunnel underneath, so you can cross if you have access to the zoo and bought the ticket. And over here you can actually look at the elephants from outside, which is really nice and something I would definitely do if you visit the Frederiksberg Garden. Frederiksberg Garden is a garden that has taken many shapes. So you have elements of a Baroque garden here. And then this is actually an outline of a romantic, or I believe it's an English romantic garden. Frederiksberg Alley. I used to live here, so very close to Frederiksberg Alley or Frederiksberg Boulevard. So it's one of the main attractions of Frederiksberg as well, I believe. It's great for just strolling, walking up and down. To be fair, there's actually not that many cafes compared to what you might think, or compared to a Parisian boulevard or something like that. So it is more to stroll towards the Frederiksberg Garden and then back again. But on a sunny Sunday or Saturday, you definitely find a lot of families strolling up and down and promenading in Frederiksberg. Here on Vesterbrogade here, so actually entering a little bit into Frederiksberg here. So Vesterbrogade is one of the main streets leading towards the city center, and Vesterbrogade is known for example, many Indian shops, both clothes, but also really good Indian restaurants, like one of them called Deep, for example. And on the other side, you then have Gamle Kongevej, which is more of a traditional shopping street where you find really, really nice jewelry shops, clothes shops, different shops with artifacts or handicrafts or stuff like that. More expensive, but not over the top expensive. So definitely I can recommend maybe walking up here, going through the gardens, and then coming back on Gamle Kongevej. It's a bit more busy, not so much space to walk on as here, but it will definitely be a nice, interesting walk. Of course, now we also get closer to the lakes, and I can also always highly recommend to walk around the lakes, and we can just start talking about that here, as Frederiksberg also has part of the lakes. We also have this little garden and Bohøjskolens have. So it's a small botanic garden that is also very nice to visit. And here you have the Copenhagen Business School. You have Copenhagen Business School many places in the city, but this is the main administrative building. And here the Frederiksberg Center, a small mall, but actually quite effective or efficient in the sense that you can find mostly anything in the mall. Frederiksberg is really offering you a more upscale living experience, I would say. Frederiksberg is characterized by its green spaces, wide avenues, and beautiful old homes. There is basically just a good vibe when you walk around in Frederiksberg. and it really boasts of some really nice parks as well, Frederiksberg Garden being the obvious one. It's very family friendly. It has good schools and good shopping options along some main axes, and also the Frederiksberg Center, which is smaller than Fields in Amager, but it's still a really nice mall, I would say. So the cons for Frederiksberg is that it's very popular, meaning that the prices are really high. It's one of the most expensive municipalities in Denmark. And it can be a bit boring maybe to live in Frederiksberg if you are sort of the young and artistic type. So you might want to head to Nørrebro, the neighboring district, just to find a little bit of more vibe. Oh, so you live in Frederiksberg? Frederiksberg is sort of like aspiration for many and known to be just a really wonderful place to live. And I would probably consider it probably the best place to live, at least for me. I lived there for 16 years and I really love it. It is calm, it is upscale. You can't go wrong with Frederiksberg. It's a safe choice, of course expensive, you pay for that, but highly recommendable. Let's move on to Nørrebro. The real center of Nørrebro is around Dronning Louise's Bro. It is a really beautiful bridge that leads into the city, and you would, if you want to capture those moments with a lot of bikes in Copenhagen, of course you have many opportunities to do so, but one of the best places is exactly here. They will basically line up for like a very long line before this intersection turns green. Then if we move into the main area of Nørrebro, what immediately comes to mind is like Sankt Hans Torv, which is a really nice little square, really nice shops in these adjacent small streets. On Rysgade here, it is basically famous for antiquity shops, so it's definitely worth going there. Also very nice cafes in this area, so definitely worth a visit this area. Also the police museum is a really nice museum. You can, of course, and I highly suggest that, to go to Assistentens Kirkegård. So it's a graveyard, a cemetery, and in this cemetery, what you'll find odd is that you have people picnicking on the graves. Maybe not on the stones themselves, but just next to, and that makes this cemetery very special, and like a place for the living coming together with the deceased in a nice and respectful way. I still find it. So definitely worth a visit. Of course, there are also some famous graves, like for example A.C. Andersen's tomb here. You also have the famous philosopher Kierkegaard buried here. I don't know exactly where, but then you can go hunting for that one. Another center of Nørrebro is of course Nørrebro's Runddel, so very busy area, and on this axis here you'd find you'd find a lot of dynamism and a lot of very nice kebab stalls, food shops. And definitely you will not go home hungry if you find an eatery here at also quite reasonable prices. If you wanna catch a movie and want to go to a more traditional movie theater, I can highly recommend Empire Bio. And right around Empire Bio you also have several eateries and also Brugs here, that is a microbrewery. So definitely worth maybe walking here, going just by the Sankt Hans Torv, maybe buying a cup of coffee here and then walking towards this area and grabbing a bite. There are also some really nice restaurants along this area. And this is actually the Jewish cemetery, so also worth a visit. The pros about living in Nørrebro is that it's multicultural. It's like really the hub in Copenhagen when it comes to young, dynamic, and more artsy cafes and boutiques, and there's sort of never a dull moment in this part of the city, and that's really the main pros of Nørrebro. It's full of life. There's street markets and eclectic shops and an area of eateries with really good food from various parts of the world, basically. So really a dynamic part of Copenhagen, and Copenhagen wouldn't be the same without Nørrebro for sure. The cons is it can be a bit chaotic and noisy, especially in the more popular streets and at night. There has also been, not so much any longer, but there has been a lot of gang activity in the area, making streets unsafe with a lot of shootings. That is not the case any longer in 24, but it was the case 2 years ago. Just cracked down upon by the police, and now it's much safer. So that's really nice. So highly recommend for the dynamism for sure. I think most people living in Copenhagen would agree that Nørrebro caters mostly for the young person. Not to say that there are no more senior persons living in Nørrebro and that you can't settle there with family, not at all. But it's just a very vibrant part of the city, and it has been so since the 70s and 80s, basically. And you just have a lot of diversity and a lot of commotion, stuff going on in the streets, which makes it super interesting if you're young and new to the city, but also want to find people with different mindsets and different cultures and different ways of thinking, and maybe you're not so much into like a boring stroll with your 2 toddlers. So I would highly recommend Nørrebro for you if you want to have some multiculturalism and just want experiences every day, but it's not for you if you want to settle in a more calm neighborhood. Even though you can still find calm neighborhoods in Nørrebro, but you get the point. Let's move on to Østerbro. Zooming in on Østerbro and Nordhavn, all in combination, we could say that Østerbro is one of the old neighborhoods of Copenhagen, while Nordhavn is essentially like an artificial sort of addition to Østerbro, and that's probably why Google puts it as one here on the map. I think for many people it has surprised how Nordhavn has sort of taken shape very quickly and also become very fashionable and quite expensive to live. But beginning with Østerbro, Østerbro is basically known for Fælledparken. It's probably the largest park in Copenhagen. It's an open field, it's flat, you have many football fields. Here you have many events, large events, like there's a yearly run for companies, it's called DHL run, and if you work for a Danish company, you will likely be asked at some point in, I believe it's May typically, whether you want to participate, or is it September? Yeah, I don't remember. But also parts of the park is the hospital, the main hospital in Denmark actually, so the largest one. It has a helicopter pad on the top. So they are typically, here you'd find the most advanced surgeries, treatments that you would get, and many people would fly in from Greenland, Faroe Islands, Jutland to get the special treatment here. The main axis is basically Blinddarmsvej here. You have the Freemason building here. That is also, you can't visit it, but you can look at it from the outside. Sometimes you can visit it at the culture night. So look out for that. That's in the fall. And then you have this very long axis actually leading towards Hellerup. So Østerbrogade, and here you have a lot of really nice shops. I used to be a postman in this area, so I know the area quite well. And I used to actually deliver post to all the businesses along this route, including residential buildings. And that took a long time, but basically leading towards Hellerup. All these areas are residential, If I should point out, you have though some embassies in this area, which makes this area a little bit more, I would say, boring, and you have less commercial activity in this area. Whereas you can see here, this street, Nordre Frederiksberg is really a nice street to do shopping, and also Østerbro, as I pointed out. Of course, I shouldn't mention Parken, which is the national stadium of Denmark. I don't think that many Danes actually are that proud of it. It's not an amazing stadium in any way. There's also all sorts of problems with the grass, and it's not very big. Yeah, it has terrible sound or it's known for having terrible sounds for concerts. But anyway, it is the largest stadium that we have in Denmark. It can support around 40,000 spectators for a football match. If we then move to Nordhavn, we have a metro line to Nordhavn, and we have this very nice cinema as well, Big Bio Nordhavn. But apart from that, it's mainly residential areas and buildings, and then as we go further out, this has not been built out yet. So and I'm now talking in 2024, so you still have some industrial parts of Nordhavn that has not been built out yet, but will be soon. Nordhavn has one, if not the highest price per square meter for apartments, so it is really expensive to live here. Also, I should point out Svanemøllen. So Svanemøllen is basically a station, but if you just come from, I would say, inner Østerbro and go to Østerbro North or Svanemøllen area, you actually find a little beach. I wouldn't say it's a secret because there's a lot of people when it's sunny, but nevertheless a really nice beach where you can take a swim should you decide to live in this area. The pros with Østerbro and Nordhavn is that it offers like a more relaxed pace of life with a mix of modern apartments and classic Danish homes. Østerbro is like a family-friendly place, I would say, with like the huge Fælleparken right in the middle. It's all flat and a bit boring maybe, but it's just so huge that you can be a little bit to yourself and have a picnic without problems. And there's a lot of activities going on as well in the park. There's a lot of schools in the area. It's very residential, and Nordhavn is known for its waterfront living and sustainable architecture, while at the same time also being quite busy. And that brings me to the cons. So these neighborhoods are a bit further from the city center, so there's a bit of a longer commute, especially from Nordhavn. And Nordhavn's waterfronts are really popular because you have evening sun on some of them. So if you settle and you have the money to settle right next to a waterfront and think in the wintertime, yeah, this is going to be awesome for me in the summertime, then just consider there might be some boom blasters playing loud music all summer long and into the late nights. So just consider that. Nordhavn is super expensive. Østerbro is also expensive, but I do also find Østerbro slightly boring as well on the con side to it. To me, Østerbro is sort of the dull version of Frederiksberg, in the sense that, well, I lived there around 16 years ago, and at that time it wasn't very interesting. There were only a few streets like Østerbrogade and Nordre Frihavnsgade that were sort of like aspiring to become interesting. And I actually worked as a postman and just delivered mail to shops, and it was just a little bit sleepy. And I still feel that many areas of Østerbro are just large residential areas without much going on, especially close to Kastellet, close to Frederiksberg in the inner part of the city center where there are many embassies. But of course, as you move towards Parken and the side of Nørrebro as well, Rysgade, it becomes more interesting for sure. So great place to settle for a family. Great place to settle if you want a little bit more of a calm neighborhood, much compared to Frederiksberg. I do still think, though, that Frederiksberg has a little bit of edge over Østerbro in the sense of like bourgeois lifestyle and a nicer vibe to it, basically. Another thing I would just add there is also that many places in Østerbro, there's just super hard to find parking. And I know a lot of my friends who have been living there, and they tell horror stories about having to circle for almost an hour to find a parking spot. That is not how it is in Frederiksberg for sure, even though it is getting there. All right, let's move on to Amager and see what that can do for us. So the final part is Amager, and of course it's just a huge area with a highway going through, and Kalvebodfjellet here and Amagerfjellet just being a huge open area, and of course an airport. So of course south of the highway is maybe not so interesting for you in terms of finding a place to live. Well, you can actually live here, and that's perfectly fine, and also in Dragør. But I will focus a little bit more on sort of the inner parts of what is considered Amager. Of course, if we're talking about Amager proper, you might have people from Christiania not thinking that they live on Amager, but well, technically it is part of Amager. Nevertheless, we will just cover what is not part of the city center here, and then say the highlights is the Amager Strand Park. So this area where you have a really nice beach here. You have some really nice walks out here, and actually a little harbor here. And then what brings it all together is really the Amagerbrogade here, which is until Sundby Øster. Around here, it's like a really nice with nice streets, and then it becomes a little bit more residential, this part. But there's a lot of people living in Amager, and maybe not so many attractions as you would have in other parts of the city. And this area here called Islandsbrygge, you have like a very long stretch where people swim in the summer, and you also have the evening sun coming from west here, hitting this area. So it's a wonderful place to hang out after work and having just a beer with friends. There are plenty of grass to play football on, or frisbee or something like that, but just bear in mind there's just a lot of people in the summertime. But very lively, good vibes, music, and a lot of good people. And also the area behind it, Islandsbrygge, is a really fashionable, nice place to visit as well. This area, you have the IT University here. You have the DR, so Danish radio, Danish TV, Danish radio, actually with its own metro stop here. And they have a concert hall, which is really nice as well. Like, I can highly recommend, and also highly recommend like a stroll or walk in Amagerfjellet. You have cows and horses over here, which is really nice. You have Kløvermarken here, so it's basically a big football field. So not much to say about that, but if you want to take a photo of the Copenhagen skyline, I suggest you go over here and then take it, especially during the evening sun. Or maybe also morning sun, but definitely on the evening sun, you'll see the sun going down, and then with the towers in front of that spectacle. So I can highly recommend that. What should be pointed out with Amager is, of course, Ørsted. So Ørsted basically came about with just one metro line being launched into the more or less empty space here that was actually part of Amagerfjellet. So Ørsted was just built out from Amagerfjellet. And there are many opinions about Ørsted. So it was the first modernized part of the city, meaning that the quality of buildings were probably not so good as it was built out starting in the 90s. But it is also a place where you can still find fairly cheap modern buildings to buy or to rent, and therefore for foreigners it's actually a place where many people settle, also because of the convenience. You have a huge mall, the Fields Mall here. You have the highway, so if you have a car, it's easy access also to go all the way around to the north of Copenhagen if that's where you work. You have the airport, obviously. Of course, you need to take the metro here and then go with the other line to the airport. But nevertheless, so it is fairly central. And it's actually just 15 minutes on bike and 10 minutes in metro, and then you're in the city center. So I do understand why many people do live here. Only thing is that there are not that many shops and coffee shops, and the environment, like the feel of this part of the city, I don't feel it has really settled yet. So if you are really looking for more the Copenhagen feel, it is not the area to settle. Where in Frederiksberg, Nørrebro, Østerbro, and so on and so forth, Vesterbro, you get more the original Copenhagen feel, closer to cafes and small shops. So that's just the downside. You will get that as well in Amager, more the right feel, especially around Lergravsparken and this area here. As you get beyond Sundbyøster here, it's getting more boring in a sense, more typical residential, also just like houses, villas, essentially. The pros with Amager is there's a lot of development going on. It's a huge area and it offers a lot of modern living spaces close to beach and nature. Here I'm mainly thinking about the Amager Strandpark on the one end and Ørestaden on the other end. It's very well connected actually to the city center through 2 metro lines. So Amager is definitely, even though it's so huge, really actually close to the city center, and that makes it actually a very nice place to settle. There are many very large parks like Amagerfjället, Amager Beach, but also you have Kløvermarken and Lergravsparken, so many nice parks in Amager where you can stroll with your dog or your infant child or your toddler. And therefore I do really think that Amager, also being a bit more inexpensive than some of the other areas in Copenhagen, is really a good alternative for most people. On the con side, some part of Amager are still industrial and therefore can sort of lack the charm of other parts of Copenhagen. So finally, the verdict on Amager. So you just need to know that if you live in Amager, that means you're an Amagergenser, which means that you are not a Copenhagener, or at least people from Copenhagen proper, that meaning the inner city or even some of the other parts of the city might consider you not to be part of Copenhagen. And of course, it is due to the fact that you live on an island next to Copenhagen. Then we can always debate whether Christiania is within the ramparts and therefore being part of Copenhagen or being part of Amager, but that's probably a more nerdy discussion. In any case, many Copenhageners, they make fun of Amager. It's called the shit island, Lorteøen, essentially, due to the fact that actually shit was piled up in Amager back in the days when the ramparts at Christiania was actually the city walls of Copenhagen. And actually Dutch immigrants who built Christiania actually lived out here in Amager. So as Amager covers so much land, you can basically find parts of Amager just on the other side of Christiania which are completely comparable to Østerbro, Vesterbro and Nørrebro in the way the buildings looks, the feel, the atmosphere. Then if you move towards Amager Strandpark, then I believe that is one of the most interesting parts of Copenhagen right now, that is really developing a lot. There's a huge industrial area that is being demolished slowly and give space for new residential blocks with that proximity to the ocean and the beach. There's probably going to be a new metro as well out there. And of course there's the existing metro to the airport, which also makes it more interesting for foreigners. Then there's another part of Amager closer to Amagerfällen, so actually a big natural site or park where many foreigners do settle, and that is Østerbro, boasting of having the biggest mall, I believe, in Copenhagen, Fields, which is a really cool mall. And Østerbro is a nice place to settle. It's fairly cheap as well per square meter, so definitely recommendable. Maybe for a first rental or something like that, or maybe for a room. But I do also want to say that Østerbro is sort of an artificial place. It's just built on a metro line going straight into nowhere, basically, like 30 years ago. So you don't get that interconnected feel that you would get in the rest of the city, and it has not grown together with the city, which it will never do, because on the one side it has a park, and on the other side it has a residential area with small villas, which will never grow into like large skyscrapers and places where a lot of people will commute through, and so on and so forth. So it will be that particular sort of land where you go with metro and in the morning, and or where you go to work in the morning and come back to with the metro in the evening as well. And I do think you can sense that in the streets in Østerbro. And so I just want to warn you a little bit about that. That it might not be the true Copenhagen feel to settle in Østerbro. So, as promised, this video is coming to an end, but I also promised you a recommendation on my favorite place to settle and the place I would settle if I was you moving to Copenhagen and wanting a nice place to settle in one of the 6 districts. So, first thing, you never go wrong with Frederiksberg. I highly recommend Frederiksberg as a place to settle. It's its own municipality. It's super nice. It has a lot of green gardens and beautiful parks. So definitely worth going there. I've lived there for a long time, so I know what I'm talking about, I believe, and it's still a place I would always recommend people to settle. Now I live close to Amager Strand Park, so on the metro line to the airport, which I really like, that proximity to going abroad, going south, going to the sun, but at the same time also being super close to the city center. Everything here is of course calculated in bike minutes, right? So I'm 15 minutes away from the city center by bike where I live, and there's a lot of new buildings that has been built here around. There's also rentals, and there's like a good atmosphere around Lergravsparken and a little bit further out. So that place I really would like to keep out for a look for. And of course, if you have the money, you can also settle in Nordhavn. But personally, to me, I think it's a little bit too expensive and a little bit too far out of the city. And then to me, Vesterbro and Østerbro, maybe a little bit of the same. Vesterbro being more interesting for, especially if you're a bit younger, Østerbro a bit older, and if you have kids, and then Nørrebro mainly if you are of a younger generation and you are still looking for some fun and some go and some nice people to hang around with, and maybe meeting new friends. It's definitely a nice place to settle. That was all for now, and if you have any questions about where to settle, and if you feel that I missed something in this presentation, I mean, I can't cover everything in the 20 minutes or so please shoot me a comment or direct an email to me, and I'll try to catch up with you, or maybe make a new video on the topic I missed. Anything in order to help you guys settle well into the Danish society and into Copenhagen. Until I see you again, take care.